Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So as the Oilers and Panthers duke it out for the right to call themselves the best team in the NHL, the Stanley Cup champions, I thought it'd be a fun idea to look ahead to next season and predict my way too early top 10 worst teams in the entire NHL. What teams are going to be battling it out for James Hagan's next season, who looks like a Macklin Celebrini level prospect. So today we're going to go through that. Thought it'd be a fun idea. We're going to start with first because you can probably assume who like the bottom three, bottom five are, and then work our way all the way down to 10th. I'm going to assume with this, like, based on how much cap space and all that, what they've said, what they're going to do in this offseason, I'm not going to assume that, like, they're going to sign the top guys every single team on here, because most of these teams are in like a heavy retool rebuild. But I am going to go based on what their roster is, based on the moves that they're probably going to make this summer, how good they'll be next season. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's trash on some teams. Up first, San Jose Sharks probably are going to be the worst team yet again in the NHL. Even with Will Smith and Malcolm Celebrini, who I think can be day one. Celebrini can be a 60-point second-line center. Will Smith, 50 to 55 points. I think they're going to be studs. But still, when looking at this San Jose team, the forward core won't be horrible. You got guys like Eklund, Granlund, maybe Logan Couture can finally come back. He missed all of last season. They definitely have some pieces. Fabian Zetterlund's very impressive from last year. But overall, the defense core is still horrible, led by guys like Mario Ferraro, Kyle Burrows. It is not that good of a defense core, on top of the fact that the tandem heading into this season is Vitek Vanacek and Mackenzie Blackwood. They got the goddamn 2021, 2022 New Jersey Devils, or 2023 New Jersey Devils tandem. It's not like there's a reason why New Jersey moved off those guys. San Jose, I don't think they're going to be, what did they have last year? Like 48 points. I don't think they're going to be that bad, like all-time bad, but you can probably expect somewhere around high 50s, low 60s next year for the San Jose Sharks. They're still going to stink. At second, I still have the Chicago Blackhawks. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are going to be a better team instead of being in the 50-point range. I think they are going to be mid-60s, but I don't expect them to really make that big of moves. You hear them rumored for Jake Gensel. I personally wouldn't love that, considering Jake Gensel is, 29 at this point. You could give him an 8-year deal. I think Chicago is going to surround Bedard with some talent, as well as, actually, Ivan Demidov or Leshinov probably won't play next year for them, maybe Leshinov, but when looking at him next year, Bedard should take another step, be an 80 to 90-point guy. Frank Nazar should be a decent middle sixer. Kevin Korchinski's going to take another step. Alec Vlasic's going to take another step, but this team is still pretty bad. The defense core is bad. The forward core is a lot of veterans with Bedard and Nazar. On top of the goaltending, last year they actually got a pretty darn good season by Petr Mrazek. I'm not sure you can rely on him, who's like 32, 33, to yet again post very solid results. So Chicago, they're still in their rebuild. They should not rush it this offseason. Go out, get Jake Gensel, trade for Marty Necas. I would not like that. They need one more year, hopefully land on maybe a Logan Hensler or have yet another top 5 pick next year. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are yet again going to be a pretty consensus bottom 3 team heading into next season. At third, I got the Columbus Blue Jackets. When looking at the Blue Jackets, they've stunk the last 2 years. I think that they could be better potentially. It's going to be very interesting to see what Don Waddell does next season, because in net, I don't think they're going to go out and get a stud. I don't really trust Elvis Merzlikins next year. The defense core is perfectly average, perfectly mediocre. Werenski solid. They would need Matejchuk and Juracek to really pop this year. When looking at their other pieces, Severson, Provorov, Goodbranson, I don't really expect bounce back massive years for any of those guys. On top of the fact that Johnny Gaudreau is a good second liner at this point. Patrick Laine will probably play next year, but no longer maybe the Patrick Laine that we know of past. The Blue Jackets, I hope that Don Waddell doesn't come in and do kind of what Kakalainen did the prior 2 off seasons and be so aggressive, because I think this team is still pretty far off. They need yet another top 5 pick next season. I think they're going to add a solid prospect in number 4, and then after another top 5 pick, then they're really good to go with like a Fantilli, Lindstrom, someone else in next year's draft. Then they'll be set. But right now, I think they're setting up to yet again be a pretty bad team next year. At fourth, it starts to get a little bit interesting. We start to deviate off the path. I think everybody would agree that the Sharks and the Blackhawks are in the bottom 3, and Columbus is probably in the bottom 5. But at fourth, I have the Calgary Flames. When looking at them, 81 points last year. But that was with Lindholm. That was with Hanifin. That was with Tanev for a solid 2/3 almost of the season. Not really for Lindholm, but when looking at it, they are coming into this season. They're going to go a lot younger, and rightfully so. They might not even have Jacob Markstrom next season. So I think that this team is going to be pretty below average. I think they will make some signings this summer, but again, it's not going to replace a Chris Tanev, a Noah Hanifin, and a Elias Lindholm, as well as a Dorov on top. So when looking at them, they still have some okay pieces. Again, I think there's a decent gap between them and the Blue Jackets right now. They still have Kadri, Sharangovich, Huberdeau, Uyghur, and Anderson. But if they roll out a Vladar and Dustin Wolf tandem next year, on top of the fact that guys like Zari, Coronado, they're not quite ready to play serious roles in the NHL. They just have a bunch of above average players, but no real game breakers at this point. So I think the Calgary is going to be a 75, 74, 73 point team. That would not surprise me at all. And they also have Kuzmenko, who they're probably going to flip middle of the season. At fifth, I have another Pacific Division team, the Anaheim Ducks. I think they are going to take a step. They are going to be in the 70s, maybe high 70s in points, but this team still isn't really ready to go. Maybe Verbeek will be aggressive. Last summer, obviously, signed Gudis and Killorn. Gudis turned out to be a very good signing. Alex Killorn, not so much. Can't really stay healthy. Already 34, 35 years old. But Anaheim did have a bunch of injuries last year. You look at basically every single top-end piece for them. Guys like McTavish, Carlson, Zegras, Minchikov. I think, Killorn also missed time, but I think Troy Terry was the only guy that didn't miss like extended time. They're going to be a better team next year. They're going to take another step, but are Anaheim like seriously poised to go on a deep run next season? I probably don't think, unless Dostal really takes that next step, and he was fantastic for Czechia in the World Championships. But I think Anaheim is still a year away. Next year, they're probably going to be in the mix for maybe a wild card spot, but no, next year, my bad. Next year, they're going to be in the mix, but next year is probably yet again lining up to be a building year, another building year if they can actually stay healthy. At sixth worst in the NHL, I got the Philadelphia Flyers. This might come to bite me in my ass because I had them roughly in this range last year. I still don't think the roster is that impressive. It's a bunch of pretty above average guys, and Torts was fantastic coaching in the first half of the season. When looking at the way that they started out in their first 45 games, a 25, 14, and 6 record, 102 point pace, but then in those final 37 games, 13, 19, and 5, 69 point pace. I tend to think that they're the team that they were in that second half, more so than the first half, especially when you consider Carter Hart's not playing for him next year. The goaltending situation of Sam Erzin and Ivan Fedotov, I'm not really have that much confidence in. The defense core is mediocre, doesn't have a number one. The forward core really doesn't have a number one center as well, with Couturier not really being the player that we expect. Well, it's honestly impressive that he even came back, but he is no longer a legit number one center. Maybe Mitchkov can come in and be an absolute stud and make up for some of the lack of offensive creation on that team. But Tortorella will yet again have to have a fantastic coaching job, even for this team to be in the mid to high 80 points. I think the Flyers come back down to earth next year and are still like a high 70 point team. At sixth overall, at sixth worst. I'm not saying they're utter garbage, but I think they are going to take a step back next year. Another Metro team, I got the Washington Capitals at seventh. When looking at it, this team, yes, they did make the playoffs, but they really hobbled in. They grinded out 1-goal games. The underlying numbers were not that impressive for the Washington Capitals. I think they were like 25th in expected goals percentage this season. Charlie Lindgren really stepped up for them. And also they sold pretty heavy at the deadline. They got rid of Mantha, got rid of a Kuznetsov. Coming into next season, we don't even know if TJ Oshie's going to play. The forward core is really unremarkable outside of like Dylan Strome and Alexander Ovechkin at this point. The forward core, I still really like John Carlson. The defense core, I like John Carlson. The defense core is fine. Goaltending tandem, if Darcy Kemper bounces back, maybe they can be pretty good. But I think right now the Washington Capitals are in that retooling phase before they kind of go full rebuild. So I would expect like an 80-point season next year for the Washington Capitals. I could be wrong because they do have a decent amount of cap space this summer, like $20 million, but I can't imagine them going like all in, signing a Jonathan Marchessault on a 4 or 5 year deal at $6.5 million. I don't expect that to happen. We'll revisit it after free agency. But right now, heading into next season, I think Washington Capitals miss by a decent margin. At eighth worst, St. Louis Blues. When looking at the St. Louis Blues last year, they really got carried by their goaltending tandem, Jordan Binghamton and Joel Hofer. They were fantastic. They were like top 5 in the entire NHL in terms of goals saved above expected, but their even strength defense and overall penalty kill also wasn't very good. Even strength defense, they were 28th in the entire NHL in terms of expected goals per 60. I'm not expecting this amazing performance from a Jordan Binghamton next year. I think they are going to come back down to earth. They still have a pretty impressive forward core. I do like their forward core, but I think the defense is going to become a far more apparent how lackluster it is when the goaltending does dry up. I expect them, again, at eighth worst in the NHL. I expect them to be 80-ish points, low 80s, maybe high 70s. They're not going to take a massive drop. They were an 89-point team last year, but I do think they are going to fall back a little bit heading into next season. At ninth, The Montreal Canadiens, 76 points last year. I think they're due to take another 5 to 7 point jump this year. Still not quite ready to be really in playoff discussions, in my opinion. I really like what they're building coming into next season. Another year of growth from Slavkovsky, Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley, Lane Hudson in the mix, on top of a guy like Kirby Dach actually hopefully being healthy after tearing his ACL and MCL in game 2 of the season. I think they're going to take another step. They're going to make some moves. They might bring in a Marty Necas, so they might even be out of the top 10 come the actual season. I think they are going to improve, not only internally, but also go out and get somebody. I don't really love the goalie tandem that they're set to run out next year, but Montembeault can maybe turn into something like an actual legit starter. So in looking at Montreal, another step in the right direction. I'd say like 82, 83 points next season. And then lastly, the Seattle Kraken. I've described them as like perfectly average, perfectly below average in this case. I said it coming into last year. People called me crazy after they made the playoffs with 100 points. This team just doesn't really do anything at that high of a level. You look at it in terms of their best players, Vince Dunn, Jared McCann, they're good players, but they're more so 4th or 5th best skaters on an actual playoff team. They're not actual stars, and I love Vince Dunn. Joey Decord really popped off last year, so they at least have some stability coming into this year in net. So that is something going in their direction, but I still think just overall, this team is okay, no actual real difference makers on this team. So they smell of a perfectly average 82 to 85 point team. That's the 10th or 11th best team in the Western Conference. They're at the deadline next year thinking about, do we sell or do we go all in for a playoff run? I don't really like where the Seattle Kraken stand right now. I do really like their prospect pool, but right now in terms of the intermediate, they're just a perfectly average team and as a below average team. And as a result, they're not going to be very good. But yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think? Here's the order: Sharks, Hawks, Jackets, Flames, Ducks, Flyers, Capitals, Blues, Habs, and the Kraken. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Who'd you move up? Who'd you move down? I'm not that high on Ottawa like I was last year. They would be like 11th or 12th before you guys scream, he's about to predict the Ottawa Senators to make the playoffs again. That's not the case. That is not the case. I promise you. So let me know in the comments. What do you think? I'll be seeing you in the next one.